Okay, everybody. I'm gonna have to apologize for the lateness of this tutorial. I was having a lot of difficulty with my recording software. I actually just figured it out literally minutes ago, so this should all work out now, hopefully. Before I was having audio sync problems and I didn't want to give you guys like a video that was hard to follow, so that's why it's gonna be a little late. So if you didn't know, VLC can actually record desktop and audio. It's just a little bit of a pain to set up. Alright, so in this tutorial we're going to go through what it takes to build a crate. And we're going to cover essentially the same stuff that we did in class, but we're going to go into a little bit more detail, and you guys can follow me step for step. So the first step in creating an asset for a video game engine is the modeling itself. So like we were talking in class, there's specific standards for polygon modeling. We want to make sure that we're mostly working in quads, four-sided faces, and avoiding triangles as much as we can, and avoiding n-gons, because if we have any n-gons, we can't import this into a game engine. So to create our crate, I'm gonna start with a Polygon Cube. And if you remember, the Polygon Cube can be up here in the top left-hand corner. Remember, we want to make sure that automatic creation is turned off, so you can do that under Create, Polygon Primitives, and then down here, Interactive Creation. I like to leave that off. And here we go. So we got our tiny little box, and the way I'm moving around is the same way I showed you in class. I'm holding down the Alt key and left clicking to pan around, holding down Alt and middle mousing to pan around, and of course the zoom is the zoom. And if you hit the F key, that'll frame your object. It's a good way to remember, F for frame. And it'll also lock the camera gimbal, which is essentially what it pans around to that object. So that's always a nice feature. Alright, so what I want to start off doing is making this crate a little less square. So I'm going to do that with the scale tool. Remember, we want to use our keyboard shortcuts for our scale. And R is going to be our scale tool, so I'm going to hit R. And you can see that we have a couple of the selectors. Something that Maya 2015 has, which is brand new, are these three ones on the side, the little panels. It used to be just these four. What these do is manipulate the object in two planes. So you can see the green is kind of in the middle of the blue and the red. So when I use this, it's going to manipulate those two selectors. This is kind of actually a pretty cool feature. So if you wanted to do like a floor, you can just make the height whatever you wanted for a floor and then scale it out really big. Before, that was a little bit more difficult. So what I'm going to do right now is make this a little less square. Actually, I'm going to scale it up a little bit. Actually, a lot. Yeah, there we go. And then I'm going to make it more of a rectangle, because I think a rectangle is more interesting than a square as far as crates go. Alright, that's kind of an interesting kind of crate size, right? Kind of standard. Of course, when you're creating your own crate, if you it would be really awesome if you could go ahead and design your own. Kind of do something that you would think would be surprising. You know, you want to show off to all the kids in the class, right? We want to make sure that we have an environment where you feel enabled to do well, because we're critiquing each other, and you want to just do your very best all the time. So that includes designing. So if you want to design something on your own, or create a crate which you've seen in a video game, which you've always loved, and just do it really well, that's fine too. Alright, so with my crate, I'm gonna do what we kind of did in class, where we have panels around. So if you remember in class, and I'm gonna select the face mode by right clicking and hitting face. I'm gonna select all my faces, and if you remember in class, I tried to extrude all the faces at once, and I got mad because my 2015 seemed to get rid of that feature, and I actually moved it to another spot. So I selected all the faces with the marquee tool, click and drag. I'm going to hold down the shift key and right click, and then that's going to bring up this menu down here for extrude face. You can also use the extrude face tool up here, but I would prefer if you use the shift right select because it's always going to be faster. And what you can see that happen is made my my geometry all black, and that's because it's extruded all the faces on top of itself. So if I was to move this manipulator right now, you would see it increases in size, but only to a certain point. That's because it's just extruding the faces all in one piece. So if I undo real quick, I still get the extrude tool. What I'm going to do is come over here into the channel box, and channel box has a lot of features which pertain to this object in particular, whatever you have selected. I'm going to scroll all the way down because there is Keep Faces tool together, and right now it's set to a default which is on. If I click on this and I type in 0, which equals off, it now allows me to extrude these faces separately. So what I just did is I selected the scale tool by clicking on one of these dots, and it gives me the manipulator in the middle. I'm going to grab that, and you can see if you scale it in, all the faces scale relative to each other and on their own. It's a really cool feature, and certainly very powerful. You'll use this a lot in the future, believe me. So if I wanted to keep going like we did in class, I could use another cool feature that Maya has, which is repeat last function tool. So essentially whatever function you last called on in Maya, it'll repeat, and you do this by hitting the G key. So because of the last tool I used was an extrude, I can hit G again, and because my faces are still selected, I haven't clicked on off the side of the screen, it'll extrude these same faces again. So if I hit G, I got the extrude, and then I pull in, and you can see it looks just like that. I'm going to go into object mode. That's pretty cool. So what I really want to do is make sure that I have essentially correct polygonal modeling. I guess the way to explain this best is that if you look at this model right now, there are a few edges sharing the same vertex. You can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 edges sharing this vertex right here. In the video game industry, that's fine, but because we're going to be unwrapping this ourselves in the UV editor, we're going to try and think forward and make it easier for ourselves later on. So the way you would do this is you go into object mode, and you'd select the brand new cool tool, which is the multi-cut tool. I'm going to select it real quick, and I want to connect this vertex to this vertex down here, and I'll show you that real quick. So the way to make sure that the line that I make from here to here is perfectly straight with these two, I have to align this line and this line to be kind of straight on with the camera. So let me show you the right way to do it real quick. So this is, I'm going to connect from here to here, and then hit enter, and there you go, you get a pretty straight line. I'm going to undo that real quick. So if I come down here, and I was going to do it again, but I'm kind of off center, let's see, I'm going to do it from here to here. It's going to create this middle vertex based on wherever your camera is pointing. So because the camera is pointing in this direction, the middle point between here and here is right here. And when I hit enter, it creates that line. But when I pan over, you can see that it's actually kind of skewed, but what we want is like a perfectly straight line from here to here. If you already created the vertex and you don't want to like undo and refix it, all you have to do is select it and grab the arrow in which plane it's in. So that would be the z-axis, you can see down here. And I'm just going to move it and kind of eyeball it so that it's straight. And that's close enough for now. But generally you want to make sure that the line is straight in the first place. So I'm going to line these lines up. That looks pretty good. It's a little tricky to select vertexes. There we go. And one more. Here to here. Always double check your work when you're done with it. Pan around, make sure that it actually did what you wanted it to do. Alright, and now you can see that we have kind of like redundant edges. So I'm going to go back into the move tool, and I'm going to do that by hitting the W key. And actually, I'm still in the tool. You can see that my multi-cut tool is still selected. So I'm going to go to object mode, click, and then that pulls me back into the move tool. So you can see that I have the redundant edges right here. This one, and this one. So what we can do to get rid of those is literally just delete them. Select one, delete, select one, delete, select one, delete. You can actually select all of them at once by shift clicking. But now that we have a better geometry for our box, it kind of makes more sense for how we're going to unwrap this later. And it'll make sense once we get to that portion. But you can see right now that we have really nice straight lines. Come back over here, you want to try and avoid geometry that looks like this. You don't all the time, but when you're making a really simple box, it's pretty important. So if you wanted to, you could go in and do all these the same way you just did. But a modeler always wants to try and save as much time as possible. So if I was creating this box and I wanted to make this all the way around in the first place, I would actually use a different method in creating these extrusions. So let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to create a new box, and you can see when I hit the Polygon Cube tool, it actually creates it in the center of this so you can actually see it. But I'm just going to scale it up anyways because I know it's there. And I want to get roughly the same size as the last one we made. And you can see that it's actually kind of hard to tell the two apart. But I know I can see the other ones right here, so I'm going to select it. And I'm actually just going to delete that. So now we have a fresh new palette. So instead of using the tool that we did before, the extrusion tool to pull all the faces in, what I'm actually going to do is use another tool. So I'm going to use the same method for grabbing the extrude tool, holding down shift and right clicking. I'm going to come to, actually first I have to be in object mode, so just right click, select object, and then hold shift, right select, insert edge loop tool. And I'm going to want this tool with its settings. So if you see this like tiny little box next to any of these words, that means there's extra settings. So I'm going to click on that, and then the settings pop up here on the left under tool settings. By default, I believe it's at the relative distance from edge. So if you have your box and you click on an edge and you hold, you will see that you get this cool green line. And what this is doing is when you let go, it's creating an edge loop, which is a loop of edges that goes around your object wherever you place it. And this is a really cool feature. It doesn't always work, so if you were to have, let's say, okay, let me show you an example real quick. So if I create an edge here to here, what happens is this face is now two triangles, right? So the insert edge loop tool doesn't know how to split these two apart evenly. So if I go back into the edge loop tool, holding down shift, insert edge loop tool, over here where all the faces around the edge I have, that's going to work fine. But if I try it over here, it's not going to draw a line in between these two triangles because it doesn't know. But if you wanted to remedy that situation quickly, all you'd have to do is use the multi-cut tool, hit this vertex, line up your line, hit this one, and enter. And there you go. So I'm going to undo all that because what I really want is this fresh box. There we go. Of course, undo is Control Z And make sure that you're kind of checking your work, because undo only has so many undos. And the funny thing is, when you undo a lot, what can happen is Maya becomes more unstable, and the more you undo, the more likely it is to crash. So try and always keep your work clean and check your work. And eventually you'll gain the confidence to where you don't have to check it as often, and you know you're doing what you need to do. But that'll all come later. So what I want to do is go back into the Insert Edge Loop tool, and with the extra settings there is a multiple edge loops little node right here, and I'm going to click on that, and number of edge loops pops up, and 2 is good actually. 2 is what I want. So I'm going to select the same edge, and what happens is you're no longer able to select where the edge loop is. It just assumes that this is in 3 parts, and it's 3 equal parts. So it's really cool if you want to separate your object into 3 equal sizes. It's not exactly what I want, but it's going to work for now. So I'm going to go back into my tool, and also the last tool that you use will be right here in the left hand side. So sometimes I use that as well. I'm going to do that again, and then one more for the up and down. Alright, so now you can see that I basically divided this box. There's a couple other ways that you could do this as well, and actually there's 100 different ways that you could do pretty much anything in Maya, but this is the way I'm showing you at the moment. So what we want to do is spread these edges out equally so that we get a similar shape to what we had before. A really cool way to select edge loops is by double clicking on an edge, and it'll select the whole edge loop. If your model's a little more complicated, sometimes edge loops can get a little more complicated. What you can do is select one edge and then double click the next edge. See, sometimes it doesn't even work. Oh, there it goes. So if double clicking one edge doesn't get the edge loop that you want, you can click one, click one, click one, and then double click the next one, and it's gonna try and assess which edge loop you're selecting by which direction you're going. So that's something to keep in mind for later. So I'm going to select both of these. What I'm going to do is scale these out. So I'm using the scale tool, and I'm just going to move these out to where I kind of want it. Right there. That's fine for now. Alright, and then I want to grab these next 2 edge loops, and I want to scale them out to the same size. And what you can do is when you're scaling these out and you already have one done, you can see that I kind of want to make this a square, a perfect square if I can. Of course, Maya's not the program for making things absolutely perfect, but you can always eyeball it. Alright, and then the last set, now this time the square is going to be up there. Yeah, close enough. Alright, so now I can select those faces in the middle. And because they're not connected, I don't have to mess with the Keep Faces Connected tool once I extrude this. Just extrude face. And okay, so you see the manipulator directly goes to the last face that you selected. So my manipulator is gonna change the direction of all these based on their the direction of the face, essentially. So if I move this blue tool, you're gonna see that they all move down, right? But if I want to move them all in the same direction for whatever reason, you see that there's this on-off button. If I hit that once, that changes relative extrusion, essentially. So instead of each face acting independently, they're all going to extrude in the same direction now. See, just like that. That's not what I want, so I'm going to go back to the normal one. Pull these in a little bit. Oh, maybe not so much. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. I'm going to hit enter when I'm finished, or I can just go into object mode. And you know what? I think that this is looking pretty good, but I want the top to be flat. I don't know why, but I just want the top to be flat. So there's another tool that we can use that's really powerful, and that is the Interactive Select and Merge Vertice tool. Actually, I'm going to show you guys 2 ways to do what I'm going to try and do. So essentially what I want to do is make this face flat with the rest of these faces again. but I don't want to just drag it up, because what's happening is these faces, no matter where I move this, is still going to be there. What I want to do is merge this vert up to this vert, and I'm going to do that all the way around, and that essentially eliminates this set of faces, which we want. Alright, so there's two possible ways to do this. First way is the safe way, I guess. So the way you do this is go into vertex mode, select the vertex you want to move, hold down the V key, V as in Vincent, and then what that does is vert snapping. So you can see when I move it around, it's going to snap to a vert. I'm going to move it to the vert that I want it to be connected with, and then let go. So now there's two verts literally right on top of each other, but we want those we want those vertexes to be merged together. We want them to be just one. So what I'm going to do is I'm still in vertex mode. I'm going to marquee select those two vertices. I want to make sure that I didn't select anything else. Okay, because sometimes you can select vertices. So if I was to select it like this, like a big marquee, you can see that I selected the one behind. So you can just control marquee select to get rid of the ones that you accidentally selected, but make sure that you just keep you're aware of what's behind you. So now I have those two selected. There is a button up here at the top. It should be there by default, called merge vertices and border edges based on selection. So what you can do is click that once, and because we had two vertices selected, they merge them together. So if I was to go into vertex mode, select this, move it up and down, you can see that it's just one vertice now. Now that was a lot of work, but if you're doing it quickly, it becomes easy. So what you could do is basically move this, snap it, move it, snap it, move it, snap it, and then select the whole thing, and then double click this tool, bring up its options, and you can see that there's a threshold. And essentially what this means is this is the distance between how far verts have to be before they merge together. So if they're literally on top of each other, this could be like a really small number, right? And they would snap together. If it's too big of a number, what might happen is this vert will connect to this vert because it's kind of close together. So that's something you could also do. There is also a tool which will make this all really easy for us. Although it's not perfect, it's a little difficult to use, and it's really easy to mess up and select the wrong vert. So what I'm going to do, actually I already have it here, I'm going to delete that from my list. I'm going to come up to Mesh Tools at the very top, and there is a Merge Vertex tool. Before I click on that, I want to add it to my shelf, which is up here. I want to add it to my shelf because I know I use it often. So the way I do that is I hold down the Control button and the Shift button, and then I'm going to left click on it, just normal click. And there you go. It gets added to the shelf. So now I'm going to select this tool, and the way this works is you can see that I have crosshairs now, and all I have to do is select the vertex that I want to move, click and drag to the vertex I want it to move to, let go, and there it goes. Just do it over here. Do it one more time, and there you go. And because of the nature of vertices, it's actually easy to accidentally grab the wrong one. And say I was trying to move this vert to this vert, you can see that sometimes it accidentally pops to the wrong one, and it's just really easy to make mistakes. So when you're using that tool, be really patient and take your time. Alright, this is looking a lot more like how I want it. Yeah, so let's say we have a top, and the cage it's got its own top. That's, I don't know, it just makes it different. Instead of having all sides extruded in, let's have one that's different, right? Okay, so the next thing we're gonna want to do is let's add some extra pizzazz to this first. So I'm gonna come up here into face and select the top face, and I'm gonna extrude. I know this seems counterproductive because I just merged it back in. But let's scale this in and see what happens. So if I scale that in, I start getting these interesting looking faces. And I know we tried to avoid these earlier on, but sometimes these faces can be beneficial to your work. So let me show you an example. So I'm gonna select these two, and I'm gonna extrude again, holding right and then left, right clicking. I mean holding shift and then right clicking. I'm gonna extrude these down. Yeah, that's looking like it. Alright, and I'm going to go into object mode, and I'm going to use our new favorite tool, which is the merge vertice. Actually, I totally lost it when they released this tool. It was really cool at the time. I'm going to merge this one up. I'm going to merge that one up. And I want to do the same thing this side, of course. I want it to be relatively symmetrical. And now I have kind of like a more interesting top. And you can see that we actually created some triangles, but that's okay. We want triangles here because that's the shape that we're trying to define anyways. Let me clean this up a little bit more by making it a little less up, straight up and down. So I'm gonna grab this edge and this edge, and I'm gonna pull those in a bit. Yeah, that's really starting to look cool. That's awesome. I mean, that's the best thing about 3D is that you can go in and start messing around with faces, and you can start literally designing on the fly. It's usually best to go in with a drawing and do it that way, but of course, if you are someone that works in 3D and you prefer 3D, feel free to design stuff in Maya. I have no problem with that, and I think that's just fine. One last thing I want to do, I'm going to extrude this face up, and I'm going to grab, actually, you know what, I'm going to leave it just like that. I know it looks a little dorky, but I'm going to go back into object mode. Ooh, object mode, here we go. Cool. Now the next tool I want to show you guys is one that I showed you in class, which is the Bevel Edges tool. So there's a couple ways to use the Bevel Edge tool. If you come up here into the right hand side, you'll see that there is the Show Hide Modeling Toolkit. I'm going to select that right now, and then that gives me a cool toolkit of kind of like commonly used modeling stuff. So you can see right here that I have bevel. So what I want to do is bevel all the edges around this dorky piece of geometry which I created to kind of smooth it out and make it a little bit cooler looking. And there's a couple ways to do this. So what I could do is select all the faces individually and then hit bevel, or I could just hit face, and because this face shares all these edges and no other ones, I can hit bevel as well, and it does exactly the same thing. So that's looking kind of alright. It kind of still looks dorky. So you can see once I hit bevel, I get these two little arrows that show up. The way you can change the size of the bevel is by center clicking and dragging to the right or the left. That'll change how this bevel works. And because I don't like this set of faces going up and down, I'm going to go back into my move tool. And you know, actually no, I'm going to select this edge loop by double clicking, and I'm going to make that smaller. And then I'm going to select this top face, I'm going to make that smaller. That's okay. It's not very interesting, but yeah, I'm going to leave it for now. So now I'm going to step back and look at my box. And actually there's a couple features in Maya that can help us see this a little better. So up here at the top you can see a couple of, oh actually you see a lot of little buttons. There's a little white sphere up here, and if you let the cursor stand over it for a minute, you see screen space, ambient occlusion show up. If you click on that, what you'll see is there's now some shadow information. And ambient occlusion essentially is is a way to create shadow on geometry where geometry faces are meeting each other based on the angle. So essentially, because these two faces are meeting at this edge right here at a sharp 90-degree angle, it's going to generate ambient occlusion shadow from here to here, and it's pretty evident to see that. Let me show you what it looks like turned off. That's just normal. That's with ambient occlusion. We use ambient occlusion all the time in the video game industry. It's a very common way to add kind of advanced lighting into an object. I bake ambient occlusion into my objects all the time. And we'll get into that in the coming weeks. I'm going to change the size of this face again. That's bugging me. Alright, so now that we have a step back and we're looking with at our object with ambient occlusion, we can see the depth a little bit better. And you know, I don't like this edge loop. I think it's adding unnecessary geometry right now. So I'm going to select it and hit delete, and that gets rid of my edge. But it doesn't get rid of my vertices. You can see that there are vertices still where there once was an edge. One way to delete floating vertices like this, because this face is now an n-gon and we don't want that, you just go into vertex mode. You can literally select your entire object and hit the delete key, and that'll delete it. Yeah, I think that looks a little slicker now. Yeah. Maybe scale this in. I know I'm harking on this, but good for now. I'm gonna leave it. Alright, the next thing I want to do is kind of break up these edges. These edges around the outside of the box are very sharp, and they don't look natural. So what I'm going to do is select all these edges, and in this instance there's no real good way to select all these because these are not edge loops. I have to go in and individually select each one. And herein lies some problem that Maya hasn't learned to fix yet. Eventually someone's going to invent a tool to select all the edges like this, and then we'll be scared and happy when it releases. Alright, so now I got all my edges selected. I'm going to double check, make sure I do have them all. You can see that I can actually see my edges through my object. That's because I secretly turned on this X-ray active components button. It's actually a really useful tool for seeing whatever you've selected. If I have vertices, you can see through the geometry, so it's easy to see what you've accidentally selected behind your object. So I like to leave that on, and it looks like I've got everything. So now I can come under Bevel. I'm going to hit that again, and ooh, I kind of like that shape. That's looking pretty cool. I didn't expect to bevel this box so much, so I was expecting more of a bevel like this, but when you bevel it like this, it's starting to look really interesting. Yeah, I think I might keep this. So I'm going to go into object mode. Cool. I like it. So what you can see now is that we have multiple edges going around that aren't really defining much. So what I mean by that is that this edge is very close to this edge, and this vertex is close to this vertex, but it's just part of a straight line. This vertex isn't breaking up this line any. Sometimes that's okay. In this instance, it's actually okay. I think we're gonna leave it how it is, just because I like this shape so much. So you can check your work to make sure that you don't have any extra vertices or like broken faces, an easy way to do that is by hitting the 3 key with your object selected. And what that does is smooth. Basically, it's duplicating all your faces and duplicating them and duplicating them and duplicating them. It's also called tessellation in modern video game engines. If you were to do this and you had a vertice out of place, it would look pretty obvious. One of these sides would look very different from the others. Because it all looks the same, I think it's okay. So I'm going to select it again and hit the 1 key, which returns it to the standard. And let's see. What time are we at? Well, I actually don't know because VLC won't tell me. Let's do one more thing to add a little bit of visual interest to this object. Let's add fins, racing fins. So what I did is just created a new box. I'm gonna pull it out of the middle right now because I'm actually gonna add this to the sides. So what I'm gonna do is scale it in, kind of make it like a thin. I want to pull it in, and I'm gonna go to the rotate tool. A really cool feature with any of the tools, if you hold down the J key while manipulating the tool, it'll snap to positions. So I can't remember what the increment is for the amount of degrees, but this is an easy way to do like an 80-degree turn and make it exact. So you can see that by coming up to the channel box. And you see rotate Y, which is the axis I'm rotating in, is, oops, undo, I missed that selection, hold down J. Yeah, 15 degrees snapping, which is really cool. So I'm going to go at 45 because 45 degrees is a cool angle. Oops. And I'm gonna move this in, move it down. I'm gonna scale it in a little bit so I'm not wasting any geometry. Move it back in. And by wasting geometry, I mean geometry that goes through this face that's not really being taken advantage of. And I'm going to grab Vertex, and I'm going to move these all the way to the top so it's intersecting. And I want to make sure that these are intersecting too. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Alright. We got one fin. Cool. And you can see that the manipulator is now not in the center. If that bothers you, that bothers me a lot. So let's go up here into Modify, up in the top. And you can see there's a center pivot tool. So if you have your object selected and you select that, it's going to pop the selector straight into the middle of the object. Kind of makes me happy. So I think this is pretty close to where I want it. I'm going to have a lot of these. But something to keep in mind when you're modeling an object is that you might not want to duplicate something before you lay out your UVs. Because laying out UVs is very time intensive. And if you're going to duplicate an object, you might as well lay out your UVs first so that you only have to move those UVs. You don't have to re-unfold them. So let's hop into the UV editor real quick. I'm kind of moving ahead, but that's okay. So I'm going to come under Edit UV and UV Texture Editor. So like I was saying in class, by default, every object has a stock UV set. So this is the stock for a box. As you can see, its proportions do not match what our actual geometry is. So I'm going to come into the UV texture editor and I'm going to press this toggle shaded UV display. And what that does is it gives us a shaded display and it's a little easier to look at. And I'm going to go into UV mode by right clicking and then selecting UV. So what UVs are literally kind of like vertices, the vertices of this flat space. So I'm going to select all the vertices in this UV shell. And the UV shell is literally a single piece of your object which you can move around. And if I were to, I can actually make any of these faces its own shell. But for now we're going to keep them together. I'm going to come up here with all of them selected and go to the Smooth UV tool. I'm going to click that once, and you'll see that this unfold relax thing comes up at the bottom. If you click on unfold and then slide to the right, you'll see that now we have our faces that have the correct proportions to our model. So that's excellent. I'm going to go back into object mode, and I'm going to minimize. Actually, I should probably close out of that so it doesn't stay minimized out of the way. So what we do in the video game industry is try and save on any kind of computing that's not necessary. So what I mean by that is that there are faces on this fin that are literally not being used at all. Like, they'll never be seen. And I'm talking about this face and the top and bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm literally going to select them one by one, and I'm going to delete them by using the delete key. Alright, so that doesn't change the appearance of this object from the outside, and it saves us on 3 faces. Not a lot in the long run, but when you duplicate this object on how many times it takes to fill in this space, that could be like, I don't know, like 20 duplicates. That means 20 times 3, you know, you're saving yourself a lot of power later on. So this is another way to think ahead. What happened is when I deleted those faces, I actually screwed up my UVs. So if we go back into the UV editor, UV texture editor, you can see that my faces are now changed. So what might have happened with yours is, let's see, I'm going to screw mine up real quick. Yours might be separated something like this. And that's fine. What we can do is actually make these separate shells into one shell. And the way we do that is by finding which edge that we want. So if I select an edge in the main editor, the edge mode, it'll actually pop up here. So it's cool to it's easy to see what's being affected. So I can see that this edge is the one that's disconnected in our UV editor. And it's not hugely important that these are connected because you probably won't be looking on this piece of geometry on this angle, but I want to attach them anyways. So one easy way to do that, and if something weird happened, it might not even be the same size. So what you have to consider is that this UV space has to represent this scale. So if your faces are a different size, you want to bring it in, and you're going to want to scale them in. Some of you might have had this problem when creating your Vs. I imagine most of you don't, but we're just showing you something that we're going to be using in the future. So now I'm going to go back into edge mode. Now that these are relatively the same size, I'm going to select the edge that's shared, and I'm going to come up here to this button, which is like the intersecting arrows. This is move and sew. I'm going to click it once, and it moved and sewed. How cool is that? What you can see though is that I accidentally made this face a little bit too small for these faces, so there's like it's not a perfect square. So what we're going to do is go back into UV. I'm going to select all these UVs. I'm going to use the smooth UV tool again, unfold, and there we go. It's much better now. Move these to the side, and I'm going to close out. So now I can do the fun part, which is duplicating this. So I'm going to bring it down here to start. Yeah, something like that. I'm going to hold down Control with my object selected and then hit the D key. D as in dog. And that's a duplicate feature. How cool is that? So now we have two faces which are exactly the same, and if I was to select both of these, come into the UV texture editor, you'll see that this is now darker blue, and that's because if I select just one of these shells, there are two on top of each other. So that's great. That means these are sharing the same UVs, and that we don't have to do that whole unwrapping, moving, and sewing process to each one of these. And that's why we did this UVing ahead of time. So now that I have my objects, which I want to duplicate, I'm going to select both of them, and I'm going to do Control Duplicate again. Ah, twice the power. Oops, I hit save. Actually, let's use this chance to save, because I haven't saved yet, and that's horrible. As you can see, my files are a mess. Classwork, crate. Those are from all the old captures, which didn't work. Crate, Redux 1. Alright. So now I saved my project. I know I'm not going to lose what I have. I'm going to duplicate again. Duplicate. And I'm just kind of eyeballing this distance in between each other. Doesn't have to be perfect. And look, I actually duplicated too many. So I'm just going to grab the ones I don't need. Oops. I do need that whole box. There we go. Now we have a really cool looking like box radiator thing. I don't know what it is, but it's cool. I like it. Alright, I think this is going to end our modeling portion of our crate. I know this is a long video. We've got 2 more long ones ahead of us. But by the end of it, we'll have a really cool crate together, and it should enable you to have... and it'll actually give you all the skills that you need to make your own really cool box, and something that you can show off in class and be really proud of and put on your portfolio and all that good stuff. So I will see you guys back for part 2. Control save.